Sorry about that. I don't know what happened. Let me try again. All right. All right. Action, lights, camera, action, take two. Let's try again. All right. So the word about this teaching from the Baal Shem Tov. It's customary to mention Baal Shem Tov's name. This teaching actually comes not from the Baal Shem Tov himself. It comes from his teacher, Rabbi Eliyahu Baal Shem. Teaching goes like this. It says in Psalms chapter 13, I believe, 14. I place God before me at all times. So the Baal Shem Tov said that if God's in front of you, that means that his right side is corresponding to your left side. And Baal Shem Tov is saying that by having God in front of you, by keeping God in your presence, by keeping Hashem in your heart and mind, that causes that your left side should be okay. Hashem is like your friend. So his right side is countering your left side. So because you have Hashem on your right side, meaning because Hashem is on your mind, that will keep your left side in check. Shavisa negdi Hashem negdi summit. I place Hashem before me at all times, and this affects my left side. As it says in chapter 9 in Tanya, the animal soul resides in the left side of the heart. That's what the Baal Shem Tov taught. And according to this teaching, your right side is okay. Your right side doesn't need to be put in check because your right side is where your godly soul rests. It's only the animal soul, which has all the naked stuff. That's where you need to address and to put in check. And by having Hashem in your presence, in your life, in your mind, in your heart, that causes that the left side should be the way it's meant to be. That's what the Baal Shem Tov taught. But the Rebbe Rashab commented, and he said, this teaching only applies to those who are absolutely righteous. Those are great tzaddikim. Those who are not such tzaddikim, so they need Hashem's presence in their life even for their right side. Meaning, even the godly soul, even the neshama, could also, we could also not interpret these signals from our neshama, from our soul in the right way. And we have to have Shvis Hashem in Hashem's presence in our heart and mind, even for the right side. Not only does our left side need to be put in check, but even our right side needs to be put in check. And this is very connected to the anniversary of passing of the Rambam, and the upcoming anniversary of the passing of the Alter Rebbe. The Rambam passed away on the 20th of Tevis, and the Alter Rebbe's passing is on the 24th of Tevis. Their passing always falls out around this Torah portion, Shemos and Va'era, and actually the Alter Rebbe passed away on a Motzei Shabbos after Shabbos on Parsha Shemos. All right, take three. Let's try this again. An image of Hashem is on Hashem's chariot. Image of man is upon Hashem's chariot. So the Alter Rebbe said that what image of man is upon Hashem's chariot? It says in the Torah, "Al dmus hakisei k'dmus mari adam lo." Like the image of man in this world, that's the image, so to speak, in heaven. Or as the Baal Shem Tov taught, God is your shadow, as you are. That's what causes the same impact in heaven. As the Torah says, Tochazi, the Zohar says, come and see. Alma Tato, the lower world is like Gavni, the Almi Lo, like the higher world. When a person shows Anpin Hirin, when a person shows a radiant, happy face in this world, so correspondingly, that creates happiness and draws down God's kindness and blessing from on high. And therefore, the Alter told the Tzemach Tzedek that that's not the way to pray. You shouldn't pray with a melancholy tune. You should pray instead with joy and happiness. And that draws God's kindness and that draws God's happiness, so to speak. The happiness we have in Hashem, as we went this morning in Torah, that causes the happiness of Hashem in us. So therefore, the Alter was, one of his final instructions to his grandson was that, understandably, his grandson was concerned for the Alter Rebbe's health because he was about to pass away. But nevertheless, the Alter Rebbe instructed him that the image on God's throne is your image. And your happiness creates happiness on high and causes the blessing of Hashem. So there is a famous talk of the Rebbe about this Torah portion. It says that Moshe was afraid when he heard the two brothers, Dasan and Aviram, talking about his killing the Egyptian. And the next verse says that indeed the Pharaoh discovered that Moshe killed the Egyptian, and Moshe was summoned to the palace, and thankfully he survived. But the question is, why was it justified for him to be afraid? Was it justified or was it not justified? So in the Rebbe's talk, he explains that the only reason the Pharaoh discovered that Moshe killed the Egyptian was because Moshe was afraid. Had Moshe not been afraid, and Moshe kept, in the language of the Tzemach Tzedek, the thing good, then it would have been good. And the Pharaoh would have never discovered about Moshe killing the Egyptian. It's because of a Jew's trust in Hashem that draws God's kindness upon a Jew. So had Moshe, so therefore the verse, every time the Torah says someone's emotion, there's always a result. Here the Torah says Moshe's emotion, he was afraid. It doesn't say what happened. So the Rebbe says, no, it does say what happened. Because Moshe was afraid, therefore this was discovered. And conversely, when we have absolute trust in Hashem, it brings the kindness of Hashem. So this theme is also echoed in the life of the Rambam, that although his life was full of tragedy, yet there is an underlying theme in the Rambam's writings and Guide to the Perplexed about a very positive and optimistic way of living life. So we see the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam employing this dictum of happiness drawing God's happiness. I want to also focus on another point. Yes, it's clear that our right side, our voice of righteousness could lead us astray and say, yeah, you got to be melancholy, you got to be introspective. And here the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam are teaching us, no, you got to understand how to use your neshama in the right way. Your neshama is you need to open up your neshama's happiness and joy and trust and kindness. But I wanted to also focus on something deeper about the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam. But before we get there, I read this morning a beautiful teaching of the previous Rebbe. In a synagogue, it often happens when the Torah is being read that there is a question if the Torah is kosher or not, because a letter is not exactly the way it's meant to be written, and you need to know if it's kosher or not kosher. So what do? It says in the Code of Jewish law, what you do is you ask a child to check out the letter. And who should the child be? Someone who's not too smart, not too silly. Because if he's too smart, he'll know what the letter is just by the context. And if he's too silly, no matter what he sees, he's not going to be able to really give anything of importation. That's a simple law in the Code of Jewish law, and that's what's done today. You call a child, what letter is this? And that's how you discover what if the Torah is kosher or not. The previous Rebbe said, he was talking on Passover about chametz and matzah. And he said how chametz and matzah share the same letters, except the ches are different. And the difference in a hay and a ches is a tiny, tiny gap between the left leg of the hay and the roof of the hay. That's what makes the letter a hay. And if there's no gap, then it's a ches. So the previous Rebbe says the reason why there is this gap, that space, is because of the Leivan Elyon, the supernal whiteness, the godly revelation. It's not a gap, it's a revelation of godliness. The letter Hey, which is part of the creation of matzah, which matzah represents humility and faith. The letter Hey has that white space because the letter Hey is about godly revelation. And this, because a child has just come from a higher world, because he has his purity, therefore, it's not that we're asking the child to see the separation. We're asking the child to see the whiteness. We're asking the child to see the godliness. Because the child comes from a godly world, therefore, if the godliness is there, the child will notice it. That's what we ask the child. So, in other words, what allows us to see the godliness in something is our own godliness. Because we are godly. And the more godly we are, the more we notice godliness. And this is very connected to the name of the Torah portion. Parsha Shmos. Shmos means the names. And this is a Torah portion which begins to talk about the redemption from Egypt, the birth of Moshe, being the birth of Moses, and Moshe announcing the coming of the redemption. What does that have to do with the idea of a name? So, Reb Pinchas Koretzer, he said that after Bogdan Chmelnytsky decimated much of Europe in the 1650s, so the Jewish people were in a state of faint. And God summoned the holy soul of Baal Shem Tov to be born to revive the Jewish people, to bring life to us. And the Baal Shem Tov indeed brought a renaissance in Jewish life. Until that point, until the Baal Shem Tov's birth, there was a certain hierarchy among Jews, similar to serfs and lords, where the Torah scholars were were considered the upper class, and the ignorant were considered lower class. And most Jews were ignorant. And the Baal Shem Tov, his birth and his way of serving Hashem, this positive, optimistic way of serving God with joy and seeing the beauty in a simple Jew praying to Hashem, this really revived everyone. So Pinchas Koretzer said that just like when someone faints, the way to revive them is by saying their name. So too God whispered the name of the Jewish people by giving us the soul of Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov's name is Yisrael. It is sort of like God whispered our name to us to revive us. God said Yisrael, and because God said Yisrael, i.e., God brought Yisrael, God brought the Baal Shem Tov, his name is Yisrael, that revived the Jewish people. So that in that analogy of fainting and being revived by your name, there's a couple of ideas which are brought out here. Number one is that when a person's awake, you don't necessarily see their core, their mind, their heart. They're communicating a lot of different parts of themselves when they're awake. When they faint and you need to revive them, you say their name. You brought back them from their state of faint, and you touch their essence. Now their essence is now animated and brought into their body, and they're back awake again. So you calling their name touch something deeper. In a similar way, the Jewish people, when they're in exile, they don't have the same developed minds and hearts of generations that lived in temple times, when Jewish minds and hearts were open to Hashem's light. But on the other hand, there's something we have in the exile which surpasses the service of Hashem of our patriarchs and matriarchs. And that is the core bond of a Jew with Hashem is more pronounced. The core bond of a Jew and Hashem is more revealed in the time of exile, precisely because we don't have the hearts and minds to, in a way, obscure the core bond of a Jew with Hashem. So, like the Baal Shem Tov, who is the name of the Jewish people, the Alter Rebbe also, by giving us the inner dimension of the Torah, the inner dimension of the Torah summons the essence and core of a Jew. But although the Alter Rebbe's teachings are logical, with understanding, they still remain pure godly content, even though they're brought into logic, brought into understanding. So that when you study the teachings of the Alter Rebbe, it also summons your name. It also summons your deepest self. It also summons your purity, even though you're using your mind, but it still has that pristine purity of Hashem calling your soul. It has the advantage of also going into your mind, but it's not, nothing's lost there. So in a similar way, in the teachings of the Rambam also, he omits a lot of teachings of the Talmud, and he just gives us the will of Hashem. In the Rambam, you see, this is what Hashem wants here, this is what Hashem wants there. There's no logical discussion, there's no back and forth. It's just, this is the will of Hashem. So the Rambam also is getting to the core of the will of Hashem. And by studying the work of the Rambam, also, we're connecting to our core. So the idea of a name is that it's something that touches your core, and that's what the Baal Shem Tov, that's what the Alter Rebbe did, and that's the core of the redemption of the Jewish people. It's that although there's an exile, but something deeper emerges, which is what brings the redemption, the core bond of the Jew with Hashem. As we see in the Jewish people who were in Egypt, they didn't change their name. They didn't change, their core bond was there, despite the fact that all these challenges that obscure that bond. So, on the one hand, there's a concealment, things are hidden. On the other hand, there is revelation of the essential bond of Jew and Hashem. And that's something that the Alter Rebbe and the Baal Shem Tov were challenged by their detractors. And if you saw my story this week from Jem, a beautiful, beautiful story. This young woman is in the Rebbe's room, and the Rebbe wanted to know if the yeshiva in Gateshead thought kindly about Lubavitch and how they treated the girls in Gateshead, the Lubavitch girls. And so this young woman tells the Rebbe that if we didn't go against the administration, they didn't give us any problems. The Rebbe said, against? A misnagid, the word misnagid means opposition. They go against. Lubavitch is only 4. That's what the Rebbe said. Lubavitch is only 4. Remember, Lubavitch is only 4. It's not against anything. It's only 4. But the Alter Rebbe had detractors. And one of the reasons they had detractors was because of this emphasis on the core bond of Jew and Hashem. I don't remember if it was in Minsk or if it was in Slutsk but there were several debates that the Alter Rebbe had with his detractors. And one of the first debates was about this subject. The detractors came to the Alter Rebbe and they said to him, there's 2 issues we have with you. Number one, by you talking about the pure faith of simple Jews and Hashem, you are detracting the honor of the Torah. Detracting the honor of the Torah because you're saying the simple people, they don't need the scholars. They have their own faith in Hashem. They also have their own beauty. They also have their own connection. And you're taking away from the respect of the Torah scholars. You're taking away from the respect of Torah itself. That was one issue. Number 2, the Baal Shem Tov taught that everyone has to do teshuvah. Teshuvah means to return to Hashem, to come closer to Hashem. And no matter how great you are in scholarship, you have to come closer to Hashem. You have to return to Hashem. So they said that's an insult to scholars saying they have to return to Hashem. So in response to them, the Alter Rebbe quoted from this week's Torah portion. It says in this week's Torah portion that when God, the Alter Rebbe said that the basis of his teachings, the teachings of the Baal Shem Tov, come from the very first revelation of Hashem to the first Jewish leader, to Moshe Rabbeinu. When Moshe Rabbeinu met Hashem the first time, Hashem revealed himself to him. Moshe saw a thorn bush that was being consumed, and yet, although the fire was consuming it, it wasn't being consumed. So the purpose of this revelation was to give a message to every Jewish leader. A Jewish leader might feel that there are those Torah scholars who they can quench their thirst because they know Torah, they know mitzvahs, they can quench their thirst of being closer to Hashem. But those who are ignorant are compared to thorn bushes because they don't have a way to quench their thirst. They don't have any fruit. So because they have this constant yearning, they're not the same. They're not the same as everyone else. The Torah scholars, they have a thirst closer to Hashem. They quench their thirst. But the thorn bushes, the ignorant, they have this thirst and they're not quenching the thirst. And so the Hashem wanted that every Jewish leader should understand the dignity of the Jew who is thirsty and he cannot quench his thirst. And the first revelation of Hashem to the first Jewish leader was that he should know, he should pay attention to those Jews who are thirsty and their neshama's yearning is not being quenched. And they should pay attention to that. They should honor that. They should respect that. They should know how to satisfy and this great yearning of simple Jews. That's what the Alter Rebbe responded. So the name of a Jew means the essence of a Jew. Just like when a person faints, you call their name to revive them. The emphasis of the name of a Jew in this week's Torah portion is the core bond we have with Hashem. And that comes to expression in our Jewish name. There was I repeated the story before, but I can't repeat it enough because it's such a beautiful story. I heard the story from Rabbi Levitten, Gesund, who was present when this happened. There was a woman who was living in New Haven. She was teaching in the Hebrew day school in New Haven, and she was, unfortunately, she had Yana Machla. She had the disease that we don't even want to say with a name. starts with a C. And she asked the Rebbe for a blessing, and the Rebbe still told her she should be careful in keeping kosher. She started keeping kosher and she started to get better, Baruch Hashem. But shortly after she started getting better, some people told her that Chalav Yisrael, being careful to have only Chalav Yisrael milk, that's only for Hasidim, that's not for everyone. And unfortunately, when she lowered her standards in keeping kosher, that unfortunately that caused her health to go down. So much so that 2 years after her first visit to Rebbe, her health was completely not the way it's not healthy. And she wanted to again see the Rebbe, and she brought her son with her to dollars by the Rebbe. And she planned to introduce her son to the Rebbe. She wanted to talk to him, but when they would give out dollars, you didn't really have much time. But if you held your ground, you could talk. You have a few seconds. But what happened more often than people having a few seconds was that when they came in front of the Rebbe, they couldn't speak at all. And that's what happened to her. She's in front of the Rebbe, and she couldn't. She lost her voice. She couldn't talk. And the Rebbe said, "Refuah Shlema, a complete recovery." The Rebbe said her name and her mother's name. And her son, who today works in a gas station in New Haven, though he's not religious, he says, "The Rebbe saw my mother's soul." There was no question. I mean, how did Rebbe know her name? The Rebbe looked at her, and the Rebbe said, first of all, she looked healthy, although externally she looked healthy, she wasn't healthy, and the Rebbe saw her name, the Rebbe saw her condition. And why is that? Because the core of who we are is our Jewish name. That's our essence. And the message of this Torah portion, the message of redemption, is to go back, to know where to go to. You have to know where you came from. Like the famous story about Yankel. Yankel didn't know which way to go, and Yankel comes to a crossroads, and there's a sign. He doesn't know how to position the sign because the sign is down. But Yankel knows where he came from, so he places the arrow to where he came from, and once he knows where he came from, he can know also where he needs to go. So it was this kind of teaching how this second Rebbe Chabad, the Mittler Rebbe, inspired Reb Hillel Paritcher. Reb Hillel Paritcher spent much of his life traveling to the colonies that were purchased and established by the Mittler Rebbe and the Alter Rebbe. The Alter Mittler Rebbe were considered by the Tsarist government with great prestige. They were called citizens honored for generations. And the reason they got that title was because they bought with a lot of money, they invested large tracts of land so that Jews should be able to have a livelihood with the work of their hands. So the Mittler Rebbe asked Reb Hillel Paritcher to travel to these far regions. There was a lot of laws that the government passed about where Jews were allowed to live, where they weren't allowed to live. And because of this, people were without income. They couldn't live in the centers, in the city centers of commerce, but they were able to create agriculture in these far remote regions. So to help them, the Mittler Rebbe and the Samach Tzedek would send this Chassid, Reb Hillel Paritcher, to inspire these Jews. So Reb Hillel recounted to his students, 6 months of the year he was out there and doing this. What inspired him? What made him want to do this? So Hillel Paritcher said, what inspired him was, the Mittler Rebbe once said to him, that when these people are out there in the fields and they're working, they're out, said the Mittler Rebbe, they're wearing their talis and they're wearing their tzitzis, and they're wearing their yarmulkes, they're wearing their kippas, and they're not trying to earn a living, to make it in life. They just want to live. They're simple people. They're working in the fields, they're working in the farms. And where do they turn to for sustenance? They turn their eyes to the sky. As in the language of the Torah, Su Mara Menechem, lift your eyes up to the sky. So Hillel Paritcher was a gifted orator, he could describe things. And he pictured and described to his students when he thought about the thousands of Jews standing out in the fields, wearing their tzitzis, wearing their kippas, looking at the sky for God to send his blessing to their field, to the work of their hands. That really motivated him to dedicate his life to go and travel, to visit these Jews and to inspire them. The Rebbe Rashab said he once actually went out to see these colonies, and he noticed that when it came time for mincha, they would put on a jacket and they all stop and they all daven mincha together. But this this inspiration of a Hillel Paritcher, what did he see? He saw the purity, the holiness of the thorn bush. And the Mittler Rebbe concluded, when he told us the Hillel Paritcher, he said, the Hebrew words, lift your eyes to the sky, are an acronym for the words Shema. The true essence of what we're trying to do with in Shema is Sumar Menechem, is lift our eyes to the sky and to realize the reality of the physical world is godliness. That's what we're trying to realize when we say Shema. And these simple Jews looking at the sky with their tzitzis, with their yarmulkes, they were there. They were there. And Abhilul Panitcher, um, when he would travel around to these colonies and inspire people, he met all kinds of Jews. And he taught people to look deeper into their lives and to live on a higher level. On one occasion, he was with his students, and he was telling them, and they were all excited because the Mittler Rebbe had just given a teaching about kindness within kindness. Kindness within kindness, said the Mittler Rebbe, means this: there is kindness on a simple level. You're doing kindness. Kindness within kindness is the geschmack, is a good feeling, is a pleasure you have in kindness. The noyam, the pleasantness in the kindness, that's a kindness within kindness. When you're doing kindness, you're not in the mood. That's just kindness. But when you have a geschmack, when you have a pleasure in the kindness, you feel the goodness of the favor you're doing for the other person. You feel good about giving. That's kindness within kindness. That's what the Mittler Rebbe taught. And Abhillah Parashar and the students, they were so excited about this teaching. They were talking about it. Amazing, amazing teaching. And there was a guy there, an elderly Jew, who was, shall we say, a little Hasidically challenged. He's like, I don't understand what you guys are talking about. Let me tell you why my Rosh Hashiva, I saw the Baal Shem Tov, this guy had seen the Baal Shem Tov, he was an older man. But let me tell you what my Rosh Hashiva, what the head of my yeshiva taught me about the words chesed shebechesed, kindness within kindness. I may lose the point with the analogy because analogy is not so relatable. He says, if you know someone needs a shoe and you give them an old shoe, I mean, in those days, what did people have? So the reason you're going to give someone a new shoe because you didn't have a new shoe, but you gave them an old shoe you could give. You gave someone an old shoe, but the old shoe needs to be repaired every so once in a while. So there's the head of the yeshiva told this man, kindness within kindness is not only do you give the old shoe, you also give a nail to fix the shoe. You take into consideration the person's predicament eventually when the shoe gets ruined. That's kindness within kindness. So Hillel Parcher share it with his students. You could see the difference. You could see the stark contrast of the depth of teaching the Mittler Rebbe and the way the Torah was learned before. And how Hasidus brings a new life and summons something deeper within ourselves that not only we're thinking about the action, but connecting with the person you're doing kindness with, especially relevant to parents and children, thinking about people in your life and connecting with them and giving to them where they are. So this is the idea of Shemais, of our names, knowing where we came from, and knowing from where we came from, knowing where we need to go. So I want to share with you one more story, which is printed in the Hair magazine. There is a clear temporary story about seeing the miracles of Hashem in our lives I wanted to share. Not so related to what we're discussing today, but connected to the idea of clarity and a Jew putting his whole faith and heart in Hashem. This story is about Rabbi Levi Shem Tov from Oak Park, Michigan. He said this past Pesach, his wife was in her third month of pregnancy with their second daughter, and the doctor recommended and administered a routine alpha fetoprotein blood test to check for serious blood defects. And when the results arrived, the doctor notified them that she needed to go through more tests. And the earliest appointment that could be made was only a few weeks later. And meanwhile, the doctor said that it's important to have updated results as soon as possible. So when they got the test, they sent it to his father-in-law, Rabbi Yitzchak Kulsky, who was a radiologist in Paris. And he confirmed also that they need to do more tests. And he encouraged his son-in-law to write a letter to them. Lag BaOmer was on a Friday. And so he planned to write a letter to Rebbe that Friday. and to report to the Rebbe on what was going on and to ask for a blessing, the evolving situation with his wife. And that week, someone posted on the community WhatsApp chat the gem My Story. And it was a story about a man named Yechiel Habura, who taught in the Beis Yehuda school in Detroit. And so, because this was a story about his hometown in Oak Park, a suburb of Detroit, he decided to share this in local shul. He got a bunch of copies and he put them around different shuls. People might be interested to hear about this guy who is known in the community. And then he comes home and he writes his letter to the Rebbe. And after writing all the details of this, what's going on, it took him so much time and so much effort to write, his hand became stiff. And so he took a break from the letter and decided to read the story himself. And what does it say in the story? Early in the pregnancy, Rehabura is writing about his own birth in 1987. Early in the pregnancy, I'm sorry, my mother took the alpha fetoprotein test to check for birth defects. The results weren't good. As the doctors explained, the levels of alpha fetoprotein in her blood meant one of three things. Either the baby would have severe digestive issues, or would have some kind of birth defect in the brain or spine, or Down syndrome. And the story went on that although the doctors recommended abortion, the Chassidim she knew told her to write a letter to the Rebbe. She wrote a letter to the Rebbe. And the Rebbe gave her a blessing for a healthy child and said everything would be okay. And when the time came, she gave birth to a completely healthy boy without any medical issues at all, which was this man, Rabbi Abura. So Rabbi Abura said, I asked my mom, how did you feel when you got the Rebbe's answer? And she said, although she was definitely still afraid, but despite all this, in a way that she couldn't quite put into words, she felt a special connection to the Rebbe, and based upon this connection, she was able to make her decision with confidence. So this guy is reading the story, and he's dealing with almost exactly the same serious medical issue. And he also said, when I read that, I experienced myself an incredible sense of clarity. And although he's an emissary of the Rebbe, he knows that the Rebbe is involved, knows the Rebbe is connected, but at that moment, he had such a profound sense of the connection with the Rebbe. And he felt that everything's going to be okay. And the results of further testing confirmed the need for extreme concern. And so early on, they insisted that there be 3 tests a week so they can closely monitor her pregnancy and to make contingency plans in the event of emergencies. And they decided that if the baby lasts the 9th month, which they didn't think it would, they didn't think the baby would be able to, should be able to carry to term. They thought they'd have to do there'll be some emergency in the middle. Then they would induce her in the first day of the 9th month. So meanwhile, they went to the Rebbe, they went to the Ohel, they checked the mezuzahs. He made a decision to add another class in Chassidus, and the doctors devised a plan how to monitor the pregnancy. And the result of their 3 times a week tests always showed the level of concern was just low enough not to necessitate an emergency birth. And every time they arrived, their Dr. Bartholomew, Friedrich Bartholomew, was very happy that I'm seeing you here, not in the hospital, because really, according to all the tests, you should go to the hospital already. But it was just below the need of emergency. And therefore, we're going to let you keep on carrying the baby. So despite all the concern of the doctors, Rabbi Shemta said, my wife and I had this absolute clarity that things are going to be okay. And unbeknownst to him, his father-in-law, who was this radiologist, he had shown this medical file to other doctors, and they were really concerned. And he told his son-in-law, you need to speak to a rabbi because there's going to be questions that are going to come up as soon as the baby is born, halacha questions about genetics, about keeping the baby. There's going to be a lot of questions that are going to come up as soon as the baby is born. You should speak to a rabbi now. And he didn't know this, but his father-in-law, because he knew what these tests might mean, he wanted to tell him basically there's a grave concern. But his wife and him were completely not in that zone. They were just absolute trust in Hashem. It's going to be good. It's going to be okay. They have a bracha from the Rebbe. And because of that story that he read, and he felt that this was a message from Hashem for him. So they were completely oblivious. And he kept that story on his shelf in his office, and every so often he would reread the story. So on Sunday evening, the 22nd of El, one day before her ninth month, his wife went to labor naturally, and Baruch Hashem, shortly afterward, gave birth to a healthy baby girl. And a few minutes later, Dr. Bartholomew proclaimed this birth is a miracle. He said that I couldn't sleep at night. I really couldn't sleep at night thinking about you. And this is mamish, like you said, a medical miracle. There's no way to explain this, how this happened. But it happened. It happened. A Jew with his faith in Hashem, as the Baal Shem Tov taught, can cross an ocean. Hashem should bring us all across the ocean to Eretz Yisrael with Mashiach Tzidkeinu. And we should remember who we are, remember our names, remember who we come from, because it is our purity we have inside our souls allows us to see the purity in others, allows us to see the good in others, allows us to see the divine providence in our lives, and allows us to see that where we are in history is the time of the dawning of the coming Mashiach. We should see it happen. Mamish.